Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lin. Namaskar. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. The US Vice President Harris, the German Chancellor Scholz, and the French President Macron are among those hoping to build a consensus on ways to end the Russia-Ukraine conflict. It's the concluding day of the Swiss Peace Summit. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterates his pledge to defeat Hamas and bring back the hostages. He says there's no other alternative. The former US President Trump visits a church in Detroit to win over Black American voters, vows to revitalize the auto industry and create jobs. World leaders gathered at a Swiss alpine resort on Saturday to seek a broader consensus for Ukraine's peace proposals at the summit. Now, the talks focused on broader concerns triggered by the conflict, such as food and nuclear security. Leaders of over 90 countries participated in this two-day summit. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky trumpeted the summit's attendance as a success, and he's predicted history being made.
The very idea of war has already lost. Putin should switch from the language of ultimatums to the language of the world majority, which wants a just peace. The UN Charter is the basis for us. And then, when the action plan is on the table, agreed by all and transparent for the peoples, then it will be communicated to the representatives of Russia. And so, that at the second peace summit we can fix the real end of the war. Now we are starting this path together. We must prove that the united world is a world of peace, a world that knows how to act correctly.
Well, leaders have strongly rejected ceasefire terms laid out by Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, to stop the conflict. The US Vice President Kamala Harris has said that Putin is not calling for negotiations, while the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz dismissed it as a dictatorial peace. Now, the UK Prime Minister also hit out at Russia for its conditions that it's putting on peace.
And let nothing about the end of this war be decided without Ukraine. By contrast, however, yesterday, Putin put forward a proposal. But we must speak truth. He is not calling for negotiations. He is calling for surrender.
It is true, peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without involving Russia. But let us not forget that, as we speak, Russia continues to relentlessly wage its brutal war. We all know Russia could end this war today or at any given moment once it ceases its onslaught and withdraws troops from Ukraine.
The Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida called on international leaders to work together to achieve a lasting peace in Ukraine. As international governments seek broader consensus for Kiev's peace proposals, the summit has been shunned by China and dismissed as a waste of time by Russia, which has pushed its own rival ceasefire plans from afar. Now, more than 90 countries have taken part in the summit, but China's absence in particular has dimmed hopes that it would show Russia as globally isolated, while recent military reverses, have put Kiev on the back foot. Kishida also restated Japan's concern over the possibility that conflict in Europe could spill over into other regions. He said that Ukraine today could be East Asia tomorrow.
日本は2年以上前にロシアが侵略を開始した直後から今日のウクライナは明日の東アジアかもしれないこうした考え方のもと厳しい対ロ制裁と強力なウクライナ支援を実施してきました。公正かつ永続的な平和をウクライナで実現することは国際社会全体を 分断対立ではなく、協調の世界に導いていくために象徴的に重要なことです。ここに集う我々が率先してリーダーシップを発揮しようではありませんか。
European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said that freezing the conflict today with foreign troops occupying Ukraine land is not an answer.
Freezing the conflict today with foreign troops occupying Ukrainian land is not an answer. In fact, it is a recipe for future wars of aggression. Instead, we need to support a comprehensive, just, and sustainable peace for Ukraine.
A draft of a communique for the Ukraine Peace Summit says that future peace negotiations should involve representatives of all parties in the conflict and follow agreements on nuclear security, food security, the return of prisoners of war and kidnapped children. It urges Ukraine's territorial integrity to be respected. The document also calls for Kiev to regain control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and access its seaports. Shifting focus, updates now from the Israel-Hamas conflict, and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated his pledge to defeat Hamas and bring the hostages back. In a video statement issued late on Saturday, Netanyahu said that there was no alternative but to stick to the goals of the conflict. His statement came just hours after 8 Israeli soldiers were killed in southern Gaza.
Despite the heavy staggering cost, we must stick to the goals of the war. The destruction of Hamas military and governmental capabilities, the return of all our hostages, ensuring that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel, and the safe return of our residents to their homes, both in the north and in the south.
The Israeli police on Saturday released new footage showing special forces raiding a house in Gaza to rescue Noah Argamani. Now, this video captures audio of the explosions and gunfire at the police, as the police attempt to secure Argamani. The Israeli forces rescued 4 hostages held by Hamas terrorists since October in a raid in Gaza on June 8. Meirjan, Andrei Kozlov and Shlomi Ziv were also rescued. Argamani, who's 26 years old, was one of the most recognized faces among the hostages abducted by Hamas terrorists on October 7. Argamani's boyfriend, Avinatan Ur, is still in captivity. And tens of thousands of protesters rallied in Tel Aviv on Saturday after they took to the streets calling for the release of hostages. Protesters gathered at Tel Aviv Square on Saturday evening. They were demanding that the government approve a deal to end the conflict and release the remaining captives. Despite growing international pressure for a ceasefire, both sides have failed to reach an agreement to halt the fighting. The Hong Kong International Dragon Boat Race was held at Victoria Harbour despite adverse weather. Some contestants and spectators said that heavy downpours failed to spoil the atmosphere. The 2-day sporting event this year includes a new PRC 75th anniversary celebration trophy. 100 coral reefs and artificial reefs were successfully planted and sunk in the area near Song Song Island in Malaysia. The director of the Kedah Department of Environment said regularly planting coral reefs is important to conserve the marine ecosystem in the waters of Reverse Island and nearby islands. In conjunction with the program, 50 kilograms of garbage was collected by the participants on the island. Listeners in Australia said that they were amazed after hearing a mix of US hip-hop group Wu-Tang Clan, a one-of-its-kind album, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, as part of an exclusive exhibit at Tasmanian Museum. The group of fans arriving for the listening parties at Mona on Saturday went through a security checkpost before hearing a 30-minute mix of this unique album. Okay, still to come here on DD India Live. At least 9 people, including children, are wounded at a shooting incident near Detroit. And animal herders have been clashing with farmers for dwindling pasture land amid a severe drought in Nigeria. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. Now, as many as 10 people, including children, were shot and wounded at. This is in a city-run water park near Detroit on Saturday evening. The suspect was still at large, but police said that they believed that he was cornered in a house nearby. The gun was found at the scene. Now, it was not immediately clear if there were any fatalities, said the police, who had initially reported 5 people had been shot. As part of a push to peel the black voters from the U.S. President Joe Biden ahead of November's election, the former President Donald Trump ventured on Saturday where few Republican presidential candidates have tread in the past, the city of Detroit. At the 180 church on the west side of the city, Trump sat on the stage at a table flanked by a panel of members of the local community, including small business owners and activists. The event was moderated by the U.S. Representative Byron Donalds of Florida, a contender to be Trump's vice presidential pick. Trump focused on his core messages, blasting the Biden administration over high inflation, crime and illegal migration, which he said has harmed black Americans in particular. He also vowed to revitalize the local auto industry in Detroit by slapping tariffs on vehicles built in Mexico and elsewhere. The U.S. Border Patrol and Texas State Police, they are joining forces to target human smugglers who transport undocumented migrants across a stretch of the U.S. southern border. In a dramatic chase, Texas authorities chased a white truck driven by a suspected smuggler at the Rio Grande, where he hopped on a waiting raft and escaped the capture back to Mexico. The Texas Department of Public Safety Lieutenant Christopher Olivares explained that the smugglers employ a highly organized system with lookout drones, guides and radios, and that the system is controlled by Mexican cartels. Authorities use the resources and officers of both law enforcement organizations to locate, track and apprehend smugglers and migrants.
Usually on the Mexican side, the criminals and smugglers will fly a drone to see where law enforcement's at. Then once they feel it's clear, they'll bring people across the river. In this case, there was one person that made it across. Border Patrol was able to apprehend her. It was a female. And they were able to prevent any other people from coming across the river. Then we saw this white truck. Border Patrol was behind it. Then we got behind it. And then it turned into a chase. The driver was able to jump back into the river. And there was already a raft waiting for him in the river and took him back to Mexico. And this is usually what they use. This individual left his radio behind. So they're constantly communicating with people in Mexico while they're being chased. That way they can try to find a way to evade capture, which in this case, the driver was able to. There was nobody in the truck. And then we looked across the river, there's probably about 10 more people that were looking to cross over the river, but we were able to stop that, which is a good thing.
Well, a high-level U.S. delegation, including the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is set to travel to India next week to meet the Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama in Dharamshala. The Republican chair of the House's Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, is leading the bipartisan congressional delegation to India. In a press release of the House's Foreign Affairs Committee, the chairman McCall stated that India is the world's largest democracy and an important strategic partner of the United States. And he looks forward to meeting with government officials and the American business community to learn how to continue and strengthen the relationship with India. Desertification and drought, especially in Nigeria's northeast region. It's leading to migration of cattle herders to areas where the pasture is lush. Now, this has led to a conflict between crop farmers and herders over the battle for land, leading to deaths and also reduced food production. Climatologists are seeking policies such as ranching for the herders as a way to, ease the situation. Here's DD India's Tessie Makende reporting from Jos, Nigeria.
Herder Abdul Bello is out with his cattle on the outskirts of Jos for pasture. He relocated from Bauchi in the country's northeast due to encroaching desertification and drought.
This is our source of livelihood, raising cows and selling them. Here in Plateau State, it rains well, so there is good pasture for cattle. In other parts of the country, especially in the far north, cows just die due to lack of water for them to drink and hunger.
Bello is among thousands of herders who are now grazing in Nigeria's north-central states like Plateau and Benue. Having migrated from the northeast Sahel region, it has triggered eco-related conflicts between them and crop farmers in host communities.
The plants don't get to mature to their full capacity before the rain stops. So one of the key problems that we have faced here is, of course, the issue of the drought, basically caused by climate change and, of course, land degradation, leading to shortage of rainfall.
According to the country's House of Representatives, over 60,000 lives have been lost due to clashes between farmers and herders since 2001. This has jeopardized food production, leading to soaring food prices and hunger. Climate experts say solutions exist.
We can actually encourage herders to see how they can get the best of their herds by keeping them in one place and then, of course, feeding them better and then getting the resources out of their herds, such as milk and meat that they can use into creating various other products.
The government has warned that herders face arrest if they let their cattle stray into farms. The president has also called on state governors, who are statutorily the custodians of land, to make it available for herders to graze on in a way that won't lead to conflict between farmers. Some governors have instituted a ban on open grazing, calling on private investments in ranches for cattle herding. But other states are yet to do so, leaving herders like Abdul Bello to search for pasture for their cows. Tassim Akende in Jos, reporting for DD India.
Sweden and Iran carried out a prisoner exchange on Saturday, with Sweden freeing a former Iranian official convicted for his role in a mass execution in the 1980s, while Iran released 2 Swedes being held there. The prisoner swap was mediated by Oman. Sweden freed former Iranian official Hamid Nouri, who had been convicted for his part in a mass execution of political prisoners in Iran in 1988. Meanwhile, Swedish citizens Johan Floderus and Saeed Azizi, who had been detained in Iran, were freed and flown back to Sweden, where they arrived late on Saturday. In Slovakia, Peter Pellegrini was sworn in as the country's president on Saturday in the capital, Bratislava. Pellegrini is a member of Prime Minister Robert Fico's nationalist left coalition and won the country's presidential election in April. Prime Minister Fico, who took power for the 4th time last October, has turned the country's foreign policy towards more pro-Russian views and initiated reforms of criminal law and the media, raising concerns about weakening the rule of law. Fico is recovering at home after being shot 4 times at close range when he greeted supporters at a government meeting in the central Slovak town of Handalova on May 15. In a surprise announcement on Saturday, the former French President François Hollande said that he would stand for Parliament in the upcoming legislative elections. Hollande said that he would stand for an MP for the southwestern Corrèze department for the new Popular Front, a left-wing grouping formed for the elections that includes socialists, hard left, Greens and communists. Hollande is not the first president to run for legislative elections after leaving the Élysée Palace in 1984, 3 years after his defeat against François Mitterrand in the presidential elections. Valéry Giscard also was elected MP from the Puy-de-Dôme department. And the elections, with a first round on June 30 and a second on July 7, were called by Macron after the far-right National Rally had trounced his centrist ruling party in this month's European elections, recording more than double its vote. In Paris, police scuffled with protesters carrying anti-fascist movement flags. In Paris on Saturday, the protesters carrying these red and black Antifa flags, they clashed with armored riot police as thousands marched in Paris and cities across France to protest against the far-right National Rally, the RN, ahead of the upcoming elections to the French Parliament. In Paris, where police said that 75,000 people turned out, a march set off from the Place de la République in East, going through the Bastille Square to the Nation. And, well, the police said that there had been about 217,000 demonstrators across France. France, Germany and Britain on Saturday condemned Iran's latest steps to further expand its nuclear program. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has taken further steps towards sabotaging the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action signed with Iran in 2015. The IAEA said that Iran started operating dozens of additional advanced centrifuges at the Natanz enrichment site and has announced that it will install thousands more of centrifuges at both its Fordov and Natanz sites. A week-long hunger strike in Venezuela ended after inmates in 20 jails and detention facilities reached a deal with the government, a non-governmental organization. Inmates were protesting against jail conditions and delays in judicial reviews. President Nicolás Maduro earlier replaced the country's head of the penitentiary affairs, Cesla Bautista, and appointed the legislator Julio Zerpa in the middle of the strike. The NGOs have criticized prisons in Venezuela for overcrowding, poor health conditions, and food scarcity, in addition to procedural delays, among other issues. Muslims across the world, including the Gulf countries, Egypt and Morocco, began Eid al-Adha celebrations with prayers and greetings on Sunday. The festival will be celebrated in India on Monday, Eid al-Adha. It's observed on the 10th day of the Dhu al-Hijjah, the 12th in the last month in the Islamic lunar calendar. Following the conclusion of the yearly Hajj pilgrimage, celebrations are contingent upon the valid lunar sighting. While Eid al-Adha is not directly related to the Hajj pilgrimage, it is significant that it's chronologically happening since it falls just one day after the pilgrimage concludes. Eid al-Adha is celebrated in remembrance of the devotion and faithfulness of Prophet Ibrahim to Allah. Eid al-Adha is celebrated to honor Prophet Ibrahim's willingness to offer his son Ishmael as a sacrifice, and his steadfast loyalty to Allah is what Muslims believe. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has conveyed his warmest greetings to Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, and to the people of Bangladesh on the occasion of the holy festival of Eid al-Adha. In his letter, the Prime Minister Modi highlighted that the festival reminds us of the values of sacrifice, compassion and brotherhood, which are essential in building a peaceful and inclusive world. He also noted Eid al-Adha as an integral part of the multicultural heritage. And he said that the Indian High Commission in Dhaka is this is what the Indian High Commission has said of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Prime Minister Modi wished Prime Minister Hasina and continued good health and well-being. Bangladesh will celebrate Eid al-Adha on the 17th of June. The Indian Army has organized a mini marathon in the Union Territory of Ladakh to mark the 25th anniversary of Kargil Vijay Diwas. The event saw enthusiastic participation from more than 316 students aged 15 to 18 years. Brigadier Prasar, who is the commander of the 121 Infantry Brigade, was the chief guest, and the Deputy Commissioner Kargil, Shrikant Suse, was the guest of honor, who jointly flagged off the marathon. The mini marathon is part of a series of events organized by the Indian Army in conjunction with the district administration to honor the bravery and sacrifice of those involved in the historic conflict. And in Saudi Arabia, Muslim pilgrims hurled pebbles at giant walls in the symbolic stoning of the devil early on Sunday morning. Pilgrims arrived in Mina after they spent the night in Muzdalifah, where they had gathered pebbles to throw at stone columns symbolizing the devil. The ritual of stoning, known as Jamarat, it marks the first day of Eid al-Adha, which is celebrated by Muslims across the globe. The pilgrims are participating in the Hajj, considered the world's biggest religious gathering and a once-in-a-lifetime duty for every able-bodied Muslim who can afford it. That's all we have in this edition of DD India Live. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those of you on the go, you can get the latest news from across the world and India on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on Android and iOS. Scan the QR code and download it. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn. Thank you very much for watching DD India Live. Namaskar.